2%. On all wealth above 2% if you have wealth above $50 million, and 3% if you have wealth above $1 billion. And this would be annual, right? So every year they would figure out what your tax bill is, and they would calculate it, they would calculate what your wealth is, and then they would expect a check. Demand a check, not expect a check. Demand a check from you for the amount of the tax. Now, both of these proposals, on top of many other proposals that have been submitted by academics, by economists, by politicians, over, I'd say, mainly the last 10 years, to try to solve a problem, and I put problem in quote, that has been supposedly identified with the American economy and American society. And that problem, we are told, is that there's too much inequality in the world in which we live. In other words, the gap, the difference between how much people make at the bottom of the income and how much people make at the top of the income scale, that gap, that difference is, according to some, too large. And this is creating, we are told, massive problems in our economy, in our society. Indeed, there was a period in which you could open up the New York Times any given day, and you would find pretty much every problem in the world somehow blamed on income inequality. Income inequality or wealth inequality, financial, economic inequality, is the cause, we are told by some, for terrorism in the Middle East, for climate change, for stagnation of the U.S. and the world economy, for crime rates, for pretty much every social economic problem. This is the problem that supposedly exists. Now, there are a number of problems with this way of thinking. First is that there's never been proposed an actual economic theory that shows us that the gap between poor people and rich people, the gap between low-income people and high-income people, that gap causes any problems. Not Keynes, not neo-Keynesians, not any economists have actually proposed a theory of why this should be. And we'll talk about the fact that indeed, if you care about economic growth, if you care about income mobility, that is the ability of people to rise up from poverty, if you care about economic success, and if you care about economic freedom, then you want inequality. Then inequality indeed is a positive characteristic, not a negative characteristic. The second problem is that what are you going to do about it? How do we solve, if there is such a problem, how do we solve it? The fact is that we are all unequal. I mean, look around the room. All different. There's not two people here who are the same, who have the same abilities, skill, talents, knowledge, interests, passions, moral character, and you could go on and on and on in characteristics as human beings. We're all different, dramatically different. I mean, isn't that what makes the world a pretty amazing place? Imagine if we were all the same. That would be unbelievably boring. Even if everybody was like me. It would be, for me, unbelievably boring. Never mind for you. We're different. And what happens to different people? Well, if you take a bunch of different people, you take any group of people anywhere in the world, and you leave them free. Just let them do their thing. Whatever they want to do. You know, no lying, cheating, stealing. But other than that, go for it. Do what you want to do. And you come back 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later. What do you think? Do you think everybody's going to be the same? Everybody's going to have the same? Everybody will have produced the same? No. For lots of reasons. Some people are smarter than others. Some people work harder than others. Some people have interests that are associated with not making a lot of money. For example, your professors. They're all smart, right? They're really smart people. And yet they chose not to go into a profession where they can make money. Like being a professor, from an economic perspective, sucks. You're not going to become rich. Well, it's very unusual to become rich. Why did they do it? They're smart. Could have gone to Wall Street. Could have gone to become work in a corporation. Lots of things. Why did they choose to become professors? Because life's not about money. Life's about doing what you love. Life's about pursuing your passion. And I can speak for myself, not for them, but I can tell you that doing this with students, engaging with students, teaching, lecturing, is much more fun than having millions of dollars in the bank. As hard as that is to believe, it's true. Many of us have given up the opportunity to have millions of dollars in the bank to do exactly this. Artists. I told my kids are a little older than you guys, I told my kids, follow your passion. So they followed their passion, which means they're poor. A couple of artists, they don't make any money, maybe one day, but they're living the kind of life they want to live, which, okay. So there's inequality. Somebody else chose to go to Silicon Valley and work as an engineer. Guess what? They're making more money than my kids. Choices. Choices that make sense. So the second problem is that we're all massively different. Metaphysically so. And therefore we're all going to produce different amounts. We're all going to produce at different levels. We're all going to create different stuff. And therefore we're going to have different levels of wealth. And why should anybody care? Why does that matter? And if we do care, and if we want to fix it, what's the only way to fix it? Well, think about basketball inequality, right? Everybody talks about income inequality. What concerns me, what bugs me, is basketball inequality. Like, I want to be able to get on a basketball court with LeBron James and score a basket. One basket. I'd be happy if I can score one basket. Now, you haven't seen me play basketball, but you can probably imagine that I ain't scoring anything with LeBron James on the court. LeBron is just better than me for lots of reasons. Because he was born with better physical attributes. He's more athletic. But you know what? He worked unbelievably hard at being the best athlete he could be. He still works unbelievably hard to be a great basketball player. I didn't. Now, I suspect that even if I had, I would have never been as good as LeBron. But what the hell? I still want basketball equality. I think it's not fair. We talk about fairness a lot, right? It's not fair that LeBron is better than I am. So what do we have to do for me to be able to go on the basketball court and score some baskets when LeBron is playing against LeBron? What would we have to do? How would that happen? How do we fix this inequality? Yeah.
Tie his legs together.
Tie his legs together. So he can hobble like this. You know what? He still beats me. Even if he ties his legs together, he beats me. And he beats every one of you, is my guess, although there might be some budding basketball stars here. Who knows? What else? I mean, so tying his legs is not enough. What else do we have to do? Yeah, blindfold him would be good. Although, again, I suspect, you guys are way too gentle. Usually my audience is much more brutal. Blindfolding, I still think he would beat me, right? I mean, he knows a basketball court. He's lived on a basketball court. He could probably play the game blindfolded and probably dunk the basketball blindfolded. That's how good he is, right? Yeah, you have to break his kneecaps. Now we're getting real action, right? I mean, usually it comes out, somebody will yell, break his legs. And just to be sure, maybe one of his arms as well. And then we would have basketball equality. And only then would we have basketball equality. So in order to achieve equality, what is necessary is violence. What is necessary is to break somebody's legs. Now you say, but that's not the same, right? We don't break people's legs when it comes to income equality. So what do we have to do to create income equality? We have to take people's money. Now, I've often thought about this, right? Like, I used to live in California. I don't anymore because I object to the high tax rates. But I used to live in California. In California, every year, they used to take 55% of my income. 55% of my income is taxes. Now, 55% of my income represents what? What do taxes represent? They're taking away what from you? Your money. But what does money represent? Work. And what does work represent? How much time do you think in your life you're going to spend at work versus everything else you do in life?
55%.
55, 60% of your time in life is going to be spent working for that money. You spend most of your life working. At least most of your adult life up until retirement. Working. So when they take 55% of your money, what are they taking from you? You're taking from you your time. They're taking from you your effort. They're taking from you your skill. Half of my work, half of my time, half of my effort, half of my skill is not going to me. It's going to reduce income inequality. Why? And what's the difference between that and breaking people's legs? Like, think about it. I work hard. I make all this money. If I had a choice between somebody breaking my legs once a year or taking 55% of my income every year, I'm not sure which one I'd take. Yeah, broken legs, they heal, they can fix, right? 55% of my income, I ain't getting that back. So the only way to fix the so-called income inequality is like AOC and Elizabeth Warren suggest. Significantly raise taxes on people who produce. Now some people say, and I saw a tweet, somebody put out a tweet, billionaires don't make money, they just take it. They steal it. And if they steal it, then what? Then it's okay if we take some from them to redistribute, because it wasn't theirs to begin with. They stole it. If you steal from crook, it's not a bad idea, right? Is that true? Do billionaires steal their money or do they make it? How do you become a billionaire? Most important part of the lecture now, because I'm going to give you the secret. Hopefully you can all go out and become billionaires. How do you become a billionaire? You work hard. Lots of people work hard. My parents worked hard, didn't become billionaires. I know a lot of your parents probably worked hard, they didn't become billionaires. You got to innovate. I know a lot of innovators who never became billionaires. I mean, I think you have to work hard. I think you have to innovate. But what's missing? The ingredients missing. Yeah, in the back. What's that? If you're born with the billions. How many billionaires do you think on the list of billionaires were born with it?
Yeah, like 2.
I think it's less than 20%. Very few. I mean, the biggest names that were born with it are the Waltons, right? Where did the Waltons get their billions?
Walmart.
From Sam Walton, who gave us Walmart. So, yeah, his kids became billionaires, but Sam had to make it, right? So how do you become a billionaire other than being born with it? Because that's tough. I didn't get to choose my parents. I don't know about you guys. It didn't work for me. Yeah.
Smart investments.
You got to make smart investments. Okay, but that's begging the question, what is a smart investment? You got to have a product and resource to sell. You know, go around making lots of stores selling products and resources, and they're not billionaires. All right, last one. Yeah. Yeah, you got to create demand, and And you got to create demand, but again, every business creates demand. The question is, what differentiates the billionaire from everybody else? And the main thing is, you got to create massive demand. You got to create something that everybody wants. You've got to create something that everybody wants. Why do they want it? Why do they want it? Because everybody else has it. Is that why you guys go buy stuff? And stop. Because that's a stupid reason to buy anything. Necessity. Well, what does that mean? It means that your life, you think, is going to be better because you bought it. Now, I don't know about you. I love my iPhone. The guy who made this iPhone, the guy who created this product, was a billionaire, Steve Jobs. And I pay, I don't know, $1,000 now for these new iPhones. $1,000. Why do I pay $1,000 for this? Why do you pay $1,000 for a product?
Is this worth the money to you?
Because you believe that it's worth the money to you. But how much is it worth to you?
Enough to pay that.
$1,000? No, it has to be more than 1,000. Otherwise, I would have never bothered buying it. When you buy an iPhone for whatever price, for $1,000, it's because this is worth more than $1,000 for you. That's Econ 101. When you buy a bread at the grocery store and you pay $3 for it, it's because the bread is worth more than $3 that you're willing to give up, than $3 in order to gain the bread. So is your life better off or worse off for having bought the iPhone or the bread or any product that you buy? It should be better. Simple math. You gave up something less valuable and you got something more valuable. You gave up $1,000, but this is worth more than $1,000 to you. So your life improved. The only way to become a billionaire is to create products, values, services that millions and millions and millions, hopefully hundreds of millions of people want, because it will improve their lives and are willing to pay you more than it costs you to produce so that you make a profit. And the reason they do that is because they believe their life will be improved. So by logic, the only way to become a billionaire is to improve the lives through trade of hundreds of millions of people. Think of the richest man in the world today, Jeff Bezos. He's improved our lives dramatically by building Amazon. Think of Bill Gates, who improved the world dramatically by creating Microsoft and all the products that Microsoft have changed the world. Think of Steve Jobs. Think of Sam Walton, who's given us Walmart, which has lowered the cost of living for so many people and therefore improved their quality of life. Billionaires are billionaires because they produce something that has improved the world around them. They have made the world a better place. You cannot, unless you're a crook, a thief, a liar, unless you get massive subsidies from the government, you cannot be a billionaire without having made the world a better place to live. The money is made. It's created. It's not redistributed. The values. My iPhone is actually worth tens of thousands of dollars to me. Don't tell Apple, because I don't want them to raise the price, right? Just for me. But my ability to FaceTime with my family when I travel around the world, my ability to do business 24/7 from anywhere, my ability to look up every piece of knowledge pretty much that has existed in human history, my ability to play every piece of music that I want to off of this thing. All of that together is worth thousands and thousands of dollars. That's why I'm happy, not just willing, but happy to pay $1,000 for this. So billionaires did not take their money, did not steal their money, they created it. It's theirs just as much as basketball ability is LeBron James's. You have no more right to take their wealth that they created, then you have to break LeBron James's legs. What they made is theirs. So, on every front, this argument about inequality makes no sense. Yet, it has this real tug of the heart, a real implicit appeal to so many people. And why is that? Well, partially because we all believe that equality is a good thing. We believe equality is a good thing. In some sense. In the Declaration of Independence, the Founding Fathers wrote that all men are created equal. Didn't apply it very well, right? Given that we had slavery, but they wrote, all men are created equal. But what does that mean? In what sense did they mean that we're all equal? Equal in outcome? Well, that can't be. Because we're not. We're different. And we produce and create different stuff. So what did they mean? In what form did this equality take?
Equal opportunity.
Equal opportunity? Well, do we really have equal opportunities? I mean, really? We have different parents who send us to different schools, who might know different people, who might create different opportunities for each of us. Indeed, as a parent, I can tell you that a lot of what we do as parents is try to maximize the opportunities for our kids. We work damn hard to try to give our kids the most opportunities possible. Equal opportunities is just a form of outcome. You can't equate them without penalizing my kids because they got lots of opportunities for the benefit of other kids who didn't get as much opportunities. So it's not equality of opportunity, although I know conservatives love to counter the left's equality of outcome with equality of opportunities, but it's just as ridiculous a standard as the outcome standard. And just as negative in the sense that physical force, breaking of legs, have to happen in order to achieve it. So what kind of equality did they mean? What kind of equality is right, is just? Should there be?
Equality of natural rights?
Equality of natural rights. So equality of, I would say, individual rights. So the one area in which we should be equal is that we're equally free. We're equally free to pursue our own life. We're equally free to make choices for ourselves. We're equally free to make decisions for ourselves, and as long as we're not harming other people, then it's none of anybody's business. What we do, what we think, what we say, how we act. We equally have the right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. We should be politically equal. We should be politically free. And we should be treated equally before the law. So equality before the law. The law should be class blind, race blind, gender blind, whatever else you want to include in that. It should treat us all the same. So the key to a free society, the key, I think, to a healthy society, is the idea of freedom, the idea of individual freedom. And that's what was meant by the concept of individual rights. Today we associate rights with, we have a right to everything, pretty much. We have a right to a job, we have a right to health care, we have a right to pretty much anything. We have a right to other people's work, to other people's stuff, to other people's labor. We are told we have those rights. But that's not the concept of rights as understood by the founders or as understood by the thinkers who created the first free societies. Rights are the idea of freedom, freedom of action. Each one of us is free to act on his own behalf. And freedom, what does freedom mean? Freedom is a nice word. Everybody's for freedom. But what does it actually mean? What does freedom mean? It should be easy. Yeah. What's that?
Autonomy?
Autonomy. Not really, right? Freedom captures something else. What does freedom capture? What's freedom telling us? Yeah.
Right to make your own choices.
Right to make your own choices? Okay, what does right mean? Because right means freedom. So, at the end of the day, what does freedom mean? Freedom means the absence of something. Freedom means the absence of coercion. Freedom means the absence of force. Freedom means the absence of authority. They can tell you how to live. They can force you to live in a particular way, in a particular manner. And if you don't follow that authority, what happens to you? They use force against you, you go to jail, something bad, physically, happens to you. Freedom means the absence of force, coercion, authority. And we all should be free. Our lives belong to whom? Who does your life belong to? Who said that? Yeah, your life belongs to you. My life belongs to me. I don't have ownership over you. You don't have ownership over me. But 300 years ago, who did your life belong to? 300 years ago, who did your life belong to? The king? The tribe? The council? The state? In every country in the world, and to this day in some countries in the world, the assumption is not that your life belongs to you. The assumption is that your life belongs to some group, to some tribe, to some collective, to some authority, to the church, to some authority that can dictate how you should live, what you should do, what you should think, what you should say. And it's the breaking of that chain, the recognition that your life indeed belongs to you, not to anybody else. That is the root of this idea of freedom. You get to decide how to live your life. Nobody gets to decide it for you. And once we allow for that freedom, what happens? Once you allow for freedom, what happens? We all go and do our thing. We all go and exercise our mind, pursue our values, build, create, produce, make stuff. Some of us get rich. Some of us don't. But all of our lives improve. If you look at the period in history about 300 years ago, what was, anybody know what, like average income was about 300 years ago? How much did we make, our ancestors make about 300 years ago?
A couple hundred a year, maybe.
A couple of hundred a year, they wished. They wished. $2 to $3 a day. Does that turn out to be a couple of hundred a year? Yeah, so he was right. Sorry. I can't do math, right? Put me on stage and I can't add a subtract. For 100,000 years, if you go back 100,000 years, basically income per capita was about $2 to $3 a day. And it was flat. And it didn't change, ever. Like it went up a little bit under Greece and Rome, and then it went down once Rome fell, and then it went up a little bit, maybe in the Renaissance, but it basically stayed flat for 10,000 years. 100,000. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, it went like that, and I have to jump because it goes so high. And that's where we are today, at the peak of that thing. We are so damn rich, we don't know how rich we are. Even the poorest in America are hundreds of times richer than the average was 300 years ago, or than the poorest people today are in some parts of the world. And this phenomenon is global. How many people do you think live on about $2 to $3 a day today in the world? What percentage of the world population is what's considered extremely poor, extreme poverty? Well, what do you think, percentage-wise? How many people in the world today are extremely poor?
8%?
Heard this before, huh? Yeah? You were going to guess 30. Anybody in the back? Yell it. 12. 25, 18. All right, so we got all over the place. 30 is usually what people guess. 25, 30. The actual number is the first number we heard. It's about 8%. 8% of the world population today is considered by the United Nations extremely poor. Anybody know what it was only 30 years ago? 30 years ago was 30. So over the last 30 years, over 1 billion people have come out of extreme poverty. How did that happen? How is it that we went like that 250 years ago or so, and that over the last 30 years, 1 billion people have come out of extreme poverty? Just as a side note, by the way, this is like the best news in all of human history. Like this idea that 1 billion people have come out of extreme poverty should be something we celebrate. This should be like a holiday around us. This is great news. Yet, nobody ever talks about it. It's not reported in the media. Your generation is pretty pessimistic and, thinks the world is falling apart. And yet, we live in the best of times, fewest poor people in the world ever, and nobody even knows about it. Just an aside. What is it that caused people to get rich, relatively speaking, or to become less poor?
Deregulation.
Yeah, capitalism, freedom. About 250 years ago, there was a freedom revolution. And when everybody got free, what happened? Okay, so this is everybody poor, right? My two hands. And then one, it goes like this, right? Some people get really, really rich. And what happens to the other people? They get much richer than what they were, but in relative terms, they're not as rich as these people. But everybody gets better off. Under freedom, everybody is better off. Inequality is a feature of freedom. Not a bug, not a problem, not some issue to be addressed, but a feature. When you leave people free, they produce stuff at different levels. And it's fantastic that some people are so good at this production stuff, and they produce such good products that they become billionaires. All of our lives are better off as a consequence. Inequality is a sign that we are free. It's a sign that you can produce huge values, and it's a sign that some within our society are making the world a better place on a massive scale. Again, inequality is a feature of freedom, not a bug of freedom. So I think this is a bogus issue. Now, there are real problems in our economy, in the global economy. There are real socio-economic problems. There is a lack of mobility. It's harder and harder for poor people to rise up from poverty in America today. Economic growth is pretty bleak. Last year was pretty good. We grew at about 4%. This year we'll probably grow at around 2%, maybe 1.5%. That's pretty low by historical standards. And it means that there are less opportunities. It means that there's less wealth in the economy. In spite of the fact that unemployment is very low, labor participation rate, that is, those people who actually work, who are actually looking for work, is still fairly high, or still fairly low, so fewer people. There's still a lot of people, hopefully none of you, future yous, who are sitting in their parents' basement playing video games rather than going out to work. Now, that's a pretty good situation to be in a culture where people can afford to do that and they're not starving, because you couldn't do that in the past. But it's not good. So there are real economic problems in America today. The solution to those economic problems is not massive redistribution of wealth. All you're doing there is taking wealth from people who are really good at investing it, which means really good at creating jobs, and giving it to government bureaucrats to waste. The solution is not more controls, more regulations. The solution is the opposite. The solution is more freedom, less control, less regulation, less intervention. When capitalism, when freedom is allowed to thrive, people get wealthier, poor get richer, and life gets better. 1 billion people came out of poverty in Asia and even in Africa, not because of redistribution of wealth, not because of foreign aid, but because those countries adopted a little bit of capitalism. And a little bit of capitalism goes a long way. A lot of capitalism goes even further. So if we really care about the poor, if we really care about income mobility, if we really care about success, then what we need is more freedom, more capitalism, less redistribution, and the last thing in the world we need are 70% marginal income tax rates and a wealth tax. What we need is a resurrection of the idea, but this time followed through properly, the idea that every individual, every person has the right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you all.
For those who fall into really poor incomes, and conversely, how would you address corporate responsibility in terms of pollution? So if Jeff Bezos has
So let's do one question at a time, because otherwise I'm going to forget them and not going to be able to do it. So let's start with the marginal income tax rates, then we'll go to pollution.
Okay.
So let's start with the marginal income tax rate. So yes, the 70% rate will only kick in if you own over, let's say, $10 million or something like that. So I think it's bad for two big reasons, right? One, economically. It's really stupid economically. Why? What do rich people do with their money? Spend it? You can't spend that kind of money. So rich people actually don't spend a lot of their money. They spend a very little bit of their money. Poor people spend all their money. So if you look at income and consumption, the lower you are in the income bracket, the more you consume of your income. And the more you make, the more you save. Now, saving is not hoarding. I don't know any rich people who takes all the money. Anybody see? I don't know if your generation saw this. Do you see Uncle Scrooge? Remember Scrooge McDuck? Mm-hmm. You guys see Scrooge McDuck? He has this big vault with all his money, and he goes swimming in it, and he goes jumping on it. Rich people don't have vaults full of money. What do they do with their money when they save it? They invest it, or they put it in the bank, right? And what does the bank do with that money? They give out loans to small businesses, to large businesses, to mortgages, to other people. So the money enters the economy to productive use. Or they invest it in startups, so they invest it in the stock market, which again goes back into productive use. The last thing in the world you want, so let me one more economic point. Saving is what drives economic growth. Again, Econ 101. Saving is what drives long-term economic growth. Not consumption, but savings. So the last thing you want from an economic perspective is to tax savings. That is the worst thing you can do for an economy. And again, those savings, those investments create jobs, which employ people, which help everybody rise up. So I think that having high marginal tax rates is economically bad. Actually, from an economic perspective, you want to have lower rates the more money you make. So from a purely economic perspective, a regressive tax system would be better. Or a sales tax system. Or if you don't want to tax sales, then a flat system. And from an economic perspective, the other thing you want to do is do away with all the deductions, exclusions, favors, subsidies, all the crap that the government hands out and, let people deduct. So that you're not trying to manipulate people's behavior. You're just raising revenue. That's all you do. So that's an ideal tax system. But I also think that a marginal income tax rate is morally offensive. These guys have created something. They've made the world a better place. So their reward is we tax them even higher than everybody else. So we're going to punish people for creating wealth. We're going to punish people for creating jobs. We're going to punish people for making the great products that we all enjoy. How's that right? These are people who've taken their life seriously, applied their mind, gone out there, produced, created, been innovative, and you want to penalize them. And the more innovative they become, which means the more wealthy they become, the more we should penalize them. I mean, that to me is morally upside down. If I meet a billionaire, I'm going to thank them. Because even though they made $1,000 on my iPhone, it's worth tens of thousands of dollars to me. So there's a gap, and that gap is my thank you. I think they appreciate it. Second question.
Okay, the second question was, some people may say that Jeff Bezos has probably produced more pollution and more harm to the environment than any other individual. So how do you account for corporate social responsibility in terms of taking care of the environment? How do we balance that with free markets and regulating things like clean air and clean water?
I don't think anybody objects to clean air and clean water and making sure that we have clean air and clean water. I don't think those are the kind of regulations anybody really objects to. But the idea that Jeff Bezos has polluted the world is, I think, absurd. I mean, he has made the delivery of products more efficient, easier, cheaper, better. I don't know what of that is actually polluting. Instead of you driving to the store, you now sit at your computer and order. Maybe you've actually polluted less because now you don't go wandering from store to store to store to buy a big deal, get a good deal. You just go to Amazon, or you go to eBay, or you go to online things, so you're polluting less, maybe, right? So, look, I think at the end of the day, business has only one social responsibility, and that's to make money. Because making money means they're providing a value. What happens when they stop providing a value? We stop buying their products, and they stop making money. The best way to measure how well a business is delivering on providing us values is to look at its profitability. I celebrate when companies make a lot of money. It means they provide a huge amount of value. Other questions? Yep. Just yell. I can hear you.
So when you think about poor people, right?
You're going to have to come closer after all.
Okay. So when you're looking at the different programs, though, and that support the more poor people within our communities, which I am a part of.
Sure.
My family has subsidies because my mom is disabled. And so are you saying that, like, to get rid of, what would happen to families like mine?
Yeah. I'd say a couple of things. One is, I think if we had a freer economy, if we had a more capitalist economy, there'd be a lot more jobs, there'd be a lot more opportunities. So I'm for maximizing opportunities, not equalizing opportunities, but maximizing them. So that people have as many opportunities as possible to make money for themselves and not be dependent on others.
She was a school teacher, and she is on Social Security benefits, and we also had to have food stamps.
Yeah, so your mother is dependent on other people. And the question is, this is the question I would ask, right? The question is, does she have the right to impose that dependency on other people? That is does she have a right to take my money because she can't legitimately work for herself? Or does she do it voluntarily? That is, should people voluntarily help her? And my view is, just because you have a need, does not give you a right to use force, which is what the government does, to take money from other people. So people who actually need, like your mother, would be dependent on what they did before there was Social Security, which is charity. And charity is, I think, a legitimate form of helping people Whereas government helping people always involves taking money from people without asking them how it's being used, without asking what it's being used for.
Okay, so what if you were in that situation? You had something that happened to you that was for unforeseen reasons, and nobody's able to help you anymore because you've been sick for 6 years, and you have nothing to go back onto. And like,
If I was in that situation, I would ask people to help me, but I wouldn't have a right. And I wouldn't feel that I had a right to pull out a gun and force them to help me. Now, we live in a world right now, there is a gun. Not your mother doesn't pull the gun, but the government pulls a gun on your mother's behalf. If I don't pay my taxes, guess what? A gun shows up. If I'm in that situation, in the world in which we live in today, well, of course I'm going to take the government benefits just like your mother does. I'm not blaming your mother for taking the benefits. I'm saying that this is not an ideal world for anybody.
school teacher.
Yeah, no, I understand she worked before, but not, yes.
So it's not like she's just
Something bad happened to her, not her fault. Yeah, something bad happens to people, not their fault. What happened in American history when that happened? The neighbors came to the help. Family came to help. But it doesn't give you a right because something bad happened to you. It doesn't give you a right to somebody else's wealth, to somebody else's stuff. It's sad, but it doesn't give you a right to take other people's stuff.
Hey, so I was watching your interview with Jesse Lee Peterson, and you were mentioning about how you don't like welfare, and that got me thinking about how in the preamble to the Constitution it says that one of the reasons why they formed the Constitution was to promote the general welfare, and so that got me thinking about is that an implicit obligation on anyone who agrees to the American society that they have to give up some little bit of their comfort to provide for the general welfare, or is there a promotion that is separate from provision that
Well, the founders meant something very different by welfare than what we mean today. There was no welfare state back then. There was no redistribution of wealth at all for the first 50, 60 years of the American state. So there wasn't this idea that welfare meant redistribution as we understand it today. What welfare meant was the well-being, the general well-being of the people. And the founders understood, again, inconsistently obviously, they understood that general welfare meant freedom. That the way to achieve the best outcome for the people was by leaving them free. And that's what the rest of the Constitution basically articulates, is a methodology for establishing freedom, a free society. So we can't take that word and use the modern context for something that was written 200-something years ago in a completely different, with a different understanding and a different context for it. The founders, and there are lots of debates about this in the early Senate and the early House about whether redistribution of wealth is a legitimate function of government. And they come out clearly on the side of no, it's not. Taking from some to give to others is not what government is for. If you want to help somebody, help them voluntarily. But it's not the government's job to do it forcefully. Yep.
Well, how do you think people can get to the, like her mother, get to the pursuit of happiness and stuff if they do not? I understand opportunity is something that you were saying is different, but how are they able to get any type of ability to get to that freedom of the pursuit of happiness that we love so much if they literally can't work? You know, they can't do a job, and they can't do that because they're truly physically disabled. Say someone like my cousin with Down syndrome. I mean, I don't know how he will be able to do that without the support of the government.
Well, I disagree with you that he can't do it without the support of the government. On the contrary, I think he could do it much better if the government didn't intervene. Because one, we would be richer. All of us would be richer because the wealth that we would all have would be substantially greater, because there would be a lot more production, because taxes would be a lot lower, there'd be a lot more investment, and a lot more of building economic success. So his relatives, the people surrounding him, would be wealthier to help him out. And I think charity would do just as good of a job, if not significantly better, at providing for such a kid than I think the government does. The government is an incredibly inefficient mechanism, and it's an immoral mechanism, because the government uses force. Charity uses voluntary association. You want to give to charity, you give. You don't want to give, you don't give. And I always ask audiences, how many of you would be willing to give a little bit of money to help the kid with the Down syndrome or the school teacher that's fallen ill? And everybody raises their hand, everybody. So why does somebody have to come to my door with a gun to take my money in order to achieve that? And what if I happen to be in the circumstances where I can't support your nephew or your cousin or whatever, right? Because my kid is sick right now and I want to invest in my kid or whatever, right? I've made a choice not to support your cousin. Who are you to force me to support him? By what moral right do you force me to support him? So we take away the choice, the option of what to support, who to support, when to support, away from individual, by standardizing over a welfare state, by the government doing it, in a sense, for us, inefficiently, unproductively, and with brute force. Yeah.
I just want to say, related to what you talked before, I wanted to ask you a question
Sure.
on the education side. Just looking recently about how trade schools and the trades are becoming more need. What do you think is kind of the next step in providing jobs for the million Americans that don't really have the opportunity to go to college, but there's plenty of other jobs that we can train them up for the economy that we have?
Well, I think the greatest tragedy that actually exists in America today is public education. It's the fact that we've given the government this responsibility to educate us, and unsurprisingly, it does a horrible job at it. And it does the worst job the poorer you are. That is, the poorer you are, the poorer the neighborhood, the worse the public schools are. So it's not like it's helping in the worst parts of the country. It's actually harming in the worst parts of the country. And for example, one of the decisions public education has made, or government schools have made, is to get rid of trade schools. Why? I mean, it's obvious that what we need are more trade schools, not fewer trade schools. Indeed, there's a massive shortage today in America in, blue-collar skilled labor. Welders, people who have a real skill at a particular blue-collar job. And there's a shortage of them because there are no trade schools to train them. You need to be trained for that. So, in my view, if you want to help the poor in America, if you want to help poor kids in America, the most urgent thing to do is to privatize education. Is to get the government out of the provision of education. The government you might keep them as the funders of education, but get them out of managing schools, running schools. Get the labor unions, the teachers unions out, and have private schools. And if poor people can't afford them, the government might be able to supplement for a while, supplement their income so they can afford the schools. Get private schools competing. And what happens when you get competition? In anything. Quality goes up, prices come down. In everything. Quality goes up, prices come down. So if you want quality to go up in education, if you want the right kind of education that fits a modern economy, then what you want is to privatize that education. Get the government out of it. Get entrepreneurs thinking about how to make money in education. And by making money in education, they would drive prices down and quality up.
Can I have the last one?
Sure.
This is true. As I was driving down here to get to the hotel, I was listening to NPR, and there was some news about this skiing competition in Wyoming. And huge scandal apparently, because the women were getting $3,000 as a prize, whereas the men were getting $8,000 as a prize, and everybody was outraged and interviewing everybody, trying to fix this thing. And so that's a different kind of inequality.
Yep.
So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
So this is the idea that in sports, and we can talk about other fields as well, but in sports, women get paid a lot less than men. So WNBA players, women basketball players get a lot less than LeBron James and the men get. I think women's soccer gets a lot less than men's soccer. And the question is why? And when you look at something like the NBA, it's pretty clear. Why? Why do you think men get paid more?
Viewership, advertising.
Yeah, more people watch them. Now, whether that's fair or not, whether that's right or not, that's a different question. But the fact is that more people watch men's basketball than watch women's basketball, and therefore there's more revenue from advertising and sponsorships on the men's side than on the women's side. Is that fair? Absolutely. Because the men are producing value to more people. More people are watching them. And therefore they get paid more. And I think the same is true generally in sports. I can't think of a sport where we watch women more than men, and if there is, my guess is the women will get paid more. Figure skating, and my guess is women get paid more than men in figure skating. Because we watch the women more than we do the men.
Now you're gonna love
Now-
what
now-
the reviewer said.
Yeah.
Which he said there is an entry fee to get into this competition.
It's not what a committee decides is valuable and what's not valuable. It's what other people get from you. So that is determined in sports by the viewers. How many viewers? They're getting the value from you. But let's take other fields, because this issue of income across men and female is an interesting one. And controversial, and I could easily get into trouble over this, right? Let's take women and men, female lawyers, right? And there's some discussion about this systematic women lawyers get paid less than male lawyers. And the empirical evidence is suspect, let's say. But there's a common view that that is the case, that of the same skill set, coming out of the same schools, a woman will get paid less than a man. Now let's assume for a minute that's true. Can anybody think of a way to make a lot of money from that fact? Hire women. If they're the same skill, and you're paying them less, then an all-female law firm would make a lot of sense. And if you did that enough, like you wouldn't hire them at the same, so what would happen? A male law firm would hire women over here, so you, in order to attract them to your firm, how much would you have to pay them? A little bit more, right? Otherwise they'd stay, right? So a little bit more. So by that, you would push their wages up. But to me, the evidence that it's not the case that same level exactly, same performance, same everything, are getting different prices, is the fact that we don't have all female law firms arbitraging the difference, making money off the fact that I can get incredible skill at a lower price. So there might be other factors that are playing into the difference in wages, similar to what's going on in sports. There are other professions in which women probably make more than men. The averages is a mistake because for whatever reason, women tend to go into lower paying professions than men. And you could say that's cultural, you could say a lot of things about whether that's right or not, but that's a fact. So when we look at the average wage of women and the average wage of men, that's completely distorted because they're going into different professions. The real measure is in the same profession, same skill level, is there a difference? And the evidence there is that there isn't. And where there is, there's a great opportunity for some entrepreneur, some creative entrepreneur to go make money by hiring lots of women. All right, thank you all.